Yeah.
All right, we are live, my brother.
Welcome back, everybody. We are doing another weekly SEO jam. For those of you guys who are regular listeners here, we appreciate you guys. Like, we really do. We would not make this without you guys. Like, otherwise it'd just be two old men yelling at a cloud. Lane loves his skiing, and I love playing with my little monsters. We got other things we could be doing with life, but we love hanging here and making this stuff for you guys. Lane, today we wanted to talk about something kind of interesting, which is kind of like using SEO and pay-per-click together. And you and I both share an opinion here that it's kind of an ecosystem, and it doesn't work one. I mentioned this kind of off air, but like an example of this, somebody may Google your client's, service or product or whatever they do, click a pay-per-click link and not convert, and then go back and Google the company name and check out their reviews. And if they like what they see and it's well optimized, then they may actually pick up the phone and call. But they can also not convert if that company has no reviews or they can't find any information about them or their website sucks, for example. And, how do you measure that? Is that SEO? Is that pay-per-click? And the truth of it is it all kind of works together, which kind of leads into our thing today about Omnipresence. I wonder if you could share just a little bit about your experience with kind of just being everywhere. And I have kind of some thoughts on that as well, but I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that first.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we were just chatting about this, my take on this is we live in a multi-channel world. I think everyone kind of recognizes that. People between having their smartphones, and the apps that they can have on that, the things that they do on it. We have iPads, tablets, laptops, desktops, all sorts of devices. And then we have the offline world, which still exists. We still get in our cars and drive, and so that we still see billboards and other forms of advertising. We still get direct mail. You and I were just talking about how effective direct mail can be today, because it's so not practiced by many people other than just
nobody does it.
General postcard, in the mail. But so my take on it is we live in a multi-channel world, an omni-channel world, and you got to be omnipresent if you live in an omni-channel world. Your customers are going to be in multiple channels, and so the argument, or maybe the long-standing desire of being able to give attribution to marketing efforts and go, well, we got X amount of leads from SEO last year, and we got Y amount of leads from our PPC efforts, and we got Z amount of leads from our offline advertisements. Those days it's getting harder and harder to actually do attribution because the customer's in multiple channels. And to your point, at what point in their journey do they actually decide to pick up the phone and convert, into a lead or an appointment or even potentially a close? And if none of the other parts of the journey had existed, if they hadn't made contact with the brand leading up to that conversion moment in other channels, then would the conversion moment ever happen? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
So attribution really needs to be more like, hey, our attribution is because we're omnipresent. We're in every channel our potential customers would or could potentially be in. Budget, the budget's given the issue. So when you have budget constraints, okay, now you got to start to pare back. All right, we can't afford all of the channels. So what channels do we want to focus on? And obviously, I think we're all, you and I are at least in agreement that, the Google search ecosystem is still the number one ecosystem in the world for just about every single business.
Yeah, especially for local stuff. I think that's changing for some information-based things. I find myself using ChatGPT more, but for local businesses, it's number one, and it's not going anywhere for a little while, at least.
Yeah, so people are saying SEO is dead. Well, no, it's not. It's not. People have been saying SEO is dead. They've been making that claim for many
20 years, by the way.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Google is still the high dominant search engine ecosystem in the world, and so the AI chat or LLMs are going to start to take a piece of that market share, that pie, and that's fine, but it doesn't mean that Google still doesn't have 80 to 90% of the entire search ecosystem. And so, when it talks about, if you're talking about omni-channel or omnipresence, but living within a world of a budget, where you can't necessarily hit every single potential channel, because you can get into remarketing, obviously also all forms of PPC and display. You have offline direct mail. You have, specific advertisements in the social channels, Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn. You could just go on and on and on, right? And so those are all channels, right, where potential customers could be found. I believe that if we're living in a budget constricted world, then we want to focus within the Google search ecosystem because it's still the dominant player. And so what does that mean? Well, we need to be omnipresent in all zones of a Google search. And that means PPC, local, organic, and probably even videos and maybe even images.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said about that, kind of to unpack. One of the things you said is essentially be omnipresent where the customer is. So we were talking about, helping roofers. They could be on TikTok, but I don't think too many people are going to TikTok to shop for a roof. You want to be omnipresent where they actually go to buy things. And I'll tell you, I spent probably 10, 15 years listening to video after video of Dan Kennedy and Jay Abraham. It became this hardcore, especially Dan Kennedy, direct response. The point of advertising is $1 in and $2 out. It was not a believer in any sort of branding or omnipresence or things like that. I remember probably about 2016, I got invited to a mastermind. It was a lot of the top attorneys, and they wanted me to be their SEO person. And it was about, 2-3 years earlier, I had stopped doing my SEO agency. And so I was no longer kind of pursuing that. And I said, why do you want me there? I don't even do SEO anymore. And they said, that's exactly why we want you, because anybody else we invite has a solution they're going to try and sell us. And so we can't just we don't know this stuff well enough to ask intelligent questions. We need somebody who just doesn't have a horse in the race, who can just tell us, hey, my SEO company's doing good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's easy. I can tell you that in 5 minutes, right? I just run a quick little analysis, see what they've been building, see how you're doing, track the progress. That's easy peasy. So I got invited to this top mastermind, and it was a really eye-opening experience in a lot of ways. But all the attorneys there were the number one in their state, number one in their city, sometimes number two. But they were the guys you see on all the radio ads and the billboards and the TV spots. If you're in a big US city, somebody like I'm describing. It was those kind of guys. Sure. And I remember there were two things in there that really opened my mind to the power of omnipresence. And one of the first things was a particular challenge that a lot of these guys had is on the most of their stuff was driven by TV as their primary media, and everything else was secondary. And so what they found is, in TV, it's hard to get somebody to remember a hard to remember phone number. So if I say, hey, it's Frankie here, call 258-4167, right? By the time you hung up or by the time that commercial's passed, you don't remember the number to call. And so what they figured out is a big piece of the puzzle is just having an easy to remember phone number. So I think of one of the guys in that room was the top attorney in South Carolina, a guy named George Sink. And George Sink's phone number is 999-9999. And so what they did is they created all this branded advertising. And so their radio ads, their TV, their billboards, their SEO, their pay-per-click, their website, all of that just said 999. The problem is is what you described as attribution. How do we know the phone calls are coming from radio? How do we know they're coming from billboards? How do we know they're coming from there? And I remember there was all this internal discussion about we can't really track it. We don't know what to do more of. And I remember asking the question is it working? And they said, oh yeah. We spend 10 million a year and we make 100 million. And, or we spend, 15 million and we do 150 million, or some of the bigger ones, we spend 30 million a year. We do, 400 million. And my answer was well, then who gives a shit, right? Why do you got to track it to the penny if ultimately the machine in its totality is working? And I kind of had this idea that things in the omnipresent weren't necessary. And you mentioned there's real life too. And so a mentor of mine was talking about his experience where he had a sneaking suspicion that nobody ever called him from a billboard and they didn't do anything. And so he told me, I decided to put a tracking phone number on my billboards, and I measured it. In over 6 months, I got exactly 0 calls from my billboards. And I said, so what did you do? And he said, I decided to cancel. And so we got rid of the billboards. And I said, and what happened? Nothing.
And what happened? Yeah.
And he said, actually, the opposite. He said, all of a sudden, my radio phone calls started dropping, my TV phone calls, that even though the billboards weren't directly driving phone calls. They were reinforcing the other media.
They were big imprints on the brain. That's what
exactly.
it is.
Like if you drive the same like highway to work every day and you see the same lawyer billboard 150 times and then you're in an accident, like it registers. And this was the point where I started to realize like, this omnipresence is really a thing. And I've experienced this in the negative sense where I've had clients who like, they start pay-per-click campaigns and then they don't work because they don't have any reviews and they got a shitty website. And so even though like everything is well optimized on the pay-per-click side, at the end of the day, some of those people Google them and don't like what they find enough to actually pick up the phone and call them. So this is my way of saying like, what you said is really like everywhere, like take inventory of the fact of like, where is your client and customer already, and figure out how you can like really own the Google ecosystem, not just try and have like the best optimized GBP, because like they are looking at things like reviews. They are looking at things like your website. They are looking at your ads. Like it's not one of it, it's all of it. In fact, one of the most common things to do is what I mentioned, where they click a paid ad and then they search you organically to check out your reviews. And if you want pay-per-click campaigns to work consistently, it's hard to do that if they don't have any good reviews, or they have like, a ripoff report that's ranking for them or something like that. So that's my way of saying for you guys, like as something like you can take and use with this is like, think about Google as an ecosystem that you can own, not as a, hey, I'm going to write some magic pay-per-click ad that's going to get all the business, or I'm going to, just optimize for this one keyword and we're going to become number one in it. We're going to get all kinds of phone calls from that. I think we're well past the world. And I was talking to Rand Fishkin about this, who's like, for those of you guys who don't know, he's like possibly like the biggest name in SEO, maybe him or Neil Patel. And he's been doing it like forever and one of the most trusted names in it. And he said, sometimes the conversion doesn't even get a click. Like he was giving an example where he was in the grocery store and he went to Google and he asked, I'm trying to make risotto. Which kind of rice should I buy? And it said arborio. So he bought arborio rice, but like there's no click. He didn't go to a website. He didn't pick up a number. He didn't fill out a form. There's no attribution there. And yet that Google search directly led to the conversion of arborio rice. And so, like as Lane's kind of pointing out, like, this all works together. Like thinking that we're in a world where somebody's just going to click and magically buy. It does happen. I'm not saying it never happens, but you're going to have far more long-term success if you're just everywhere where your clients are already. And so for some of you guys, that can be a tricky thing because you may have clients who like want to do Google pay-per-click, but have shitty reviews, or they have a terrible website, or like there's a ripoff report and things like that. But, like you have to be looking at all of those things. I know it's a lot to manage, which is why, by the way, little shout out to this guy over here. Sorry, it's mirrored. This guy over here in his white label agency that does awesome work on those things for you guys, because it's hard to win the game if you're just doing one little piece of the puzzle. That's kind of the point of this rant is it's hard to win the game if you just do. I don't know if you have any thoughts you wanted to add on that, Lane Train.
Yeah, I mean, like, so, again, I'll go back to budget because I think that's probably the biggest like practical issue that every agency has to deal with a prospect and or new client is, their budget. And I'll go back to, so let's just say they say, they only have a budget of $2,000 a month. And that's really just like an SEO program for almost all agencies out there.
Yeah.
You could stick $100 into a website remarketing campaign, to maximize your SEO clicks, because that not everyone converts on the first visit, hopefully. And then secondly, you could do a $5 to $10 a day budget in PPC, run it at very, very specific times when they're the most busy, because you got a very small budget. So you don't just run it all day, every day, and maybe run it on very specific, exact match keywords that will drive really high intent for them, and maybe even the PPC doesn't necessarily like we were just talking, give you a direct attribution. But if a customer goes to Google search and types in roofing companies near me, and they see an ad, and then they see the company ranking in the 3-pack, and then they maybe see an image or a video or an organic result, you have a really high chance of winning that prospect and that lead, because you're in multiple zones of that Google search. And then you can do that very, very economically without breaking the bank and still putting the majority of the budget towards the SEO while still hitting a couple of other channels that really complement, that SEO campaign, and still get your customer in multiple zones of Google search. And then don't underestimate videos and images, because obviously we see images and videos in almost every Google search.
Yeah.
And your competitors typically aren't focusing on images and videos in the SEO campaign. And so that, again, appearing multiple times in the search is a huge boost to winning the lead, right? Because if the customer sees the same company 2 or 3 times as they're scrolling down that search result page, there's a high likelihood they're going to click on the one that they see the most. And so look for ways and easy wins to get multiple search results into the overall SERP. And then obviously the other thing is that Google guaranteed for a lot of the service-based companies and other companies that apply where Google, you can get Google guaranteed. It doesn't take anything but just the upfront time to, and labor to get Google guaranteed. In other words, to go through the process of getting approved. And then you can run very economically, an LSA or Google guaranteed campaign, and having that nice initial ad up there, plus then showing up again in search results. That's where I think you don't have to worry about attribution, because that'll just freaking work. Like you'll know the leads are coming in.
Yeah. And can I just say, like, taken to the extreme, I think of Seth Price, who we've had on the show, who's, I got to see, I remember 10 years ago having a conversation with Seth, and he was talking about the SEO he had done for his law firm. And this is obviously his own business, his own baby. And so, like, you probably might not do this for a client, but he decided that not only did he want to rank his GBP and to rank his website and the things below, but he also focused on like 7 or 8 of his directories also ranking there. And so when a prospective client in his market, which is in Washington, DC, does a search, like 9 of the 12 things they see on the first page are his company. Like, who do you think they're going to click? Right. Like, and for example, like that directory is not in any measurable way driving attribution where you can, because nobody's probably even clicking on it in the 9th spot, but it almost looks like an endorsement from Google.
It's credibility and trust, for sure.
Exactly. It conveys credibility and trust. Like, hey, I'm looking, and this seems to be the company that we should go with. Everybody seems to be talking about them and recommending them. And I believe they're also, they have a Google pay-per-click ad in there. So like you see them in pay-per-click, you see them in search, they have the most reviews, and then 8 out of the 10 listings below are also them. Like, as a prospective client, like, who are you going to click? Like, it's pretty obvious who that is.
You can build authority in your SEO campaigns to your primary authoritative directory profiles for your client. You can build authority around to those profiles. Like, use a Signal Genesis press release, and in one of your do follow links, instead of sending it to the blog article or a service page, send it to the directory profile that you want to send more authority to. And you can do things like that. And then those directory profiles, because the root domain already has a lot of authority, the individual page authority of that profile might be much lower, but you can build that PA and ultimately rank that profile on page 1, because you're going to capitalize and leverage on the root domain authority that they have.
To echo something you said earlier too, that I've found like that has worked in practice for us. One thing you guys can do that'll take your stuff so much farther is what you described, is just tack on $5 to $10 a day of retargeting and build them into the platforms. And we've had success doing this where they take a little bit to set up, but we install like multiple pixels for multiple platforms. And then rather than, the cool thing about it is you don't even really have to write the ads. Like in many cases for my clients, we're just using their best testimonials, their best content, like the stuff they already have. We're not like creating new stuff, but we took 20, 30 of those things and organized into them a campaign so that when somebody clicks on their thing, now all of a sudden they start popping up and appearing everywhere, especially for those of you guys who have like non-emergency kind of services. Like it may not work for a plumber where retarget them for, 6 months kind of thing, because they needed you at the moment the toilet was like overflowing. But for a lot of other things that are non-emergency, like, say real estate or solar panels or whatever, like you can get super cheap traffic. And from your client's perspective, all of a sudden they click their stuff, they seem everywhere. And, if they've seen their stuff 100 times, they're far more likely to convert than if you're just trying to do it in one single hero click in a perfect ad. And it takes the pressure off of you to write these like just amazing killer direct response ads that convert on the first click, knowing that that's really the start of a campaign. And they're going to be exposed to more stuff, and they're going to see their testimonials. They're going to see their reviews. They're going to see the content. They're going to see the case study video the client made. Let me show you who else I installed solar panels for. And it, like, for me, the real magic of it is it's the reach. You can spend all that money to drive traffic, and then the retargeting is dirt cheap. And it really just takes, for us, what we found, 2 pixels. 2 pixels. If you install the Meta Pixel and the Google Pixel, you can get like 5 major platforms. You can get Facebook, Instagram, you can get YouTube, you can get Google Display. And like the combination of all of that, all of a sudden, like clients just start seeing your client everywhere, and they'll go like, it'll convert. Like you said, it'll convert, and people will call and they'll go, oh my God, whatever you're doing is working. And it takes the pressure off of you guys to have these like perfect ads that convert on the first click.
Not a perfect ad. They still, only a percentage of them are going to convert. A small percentage of the minority. Yeah.
Usually like 4 or 5% according to Google, depending on your niche.
Which is why the case for retargeting included in an SEO budget is great. I would highly recommend it. It's easy to run. Like Frankie said, you don't have to like have all these new ad creatives and stuff. You just use their testimonials, because that's really, once they've clicked to your website and now you're retargeting them. They didn't convert on that first click through the website. Maybe they found you through a local ad, or they found you through your rankings. They clicked to your website, but they didn't convert yet. They're starting their journey to shop, to figure out who they want to talk to. If you don't retarget them, they may never come back to you again. But if you retarget them and stay in front of them, that first click now ends up, you extend and leverage off of that first click that was generated through either an ad or an SEO result.
Can I just add on that? Because as somebody who's done these kind of extensively, because they're always driving new traffic, we've left some of these retargeting campaigns untouched for like 3-4 years, and they still work 3-4 years later. Compare that to like Facebook ads where you got to update it every 5 minutes with new creatives. We like literally almost run them for like thousands of days in a row, and there's always somebody new who's then being enrolled into that retargeting audience. Yep. So I say that to you guys because it's a little add-on, it's a little bit of upfront work, but it's massive value for your clients.
And you can do it for literally $100 to $200 a month.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we are at our time limit. I hope we all got some value out of our SEO jam session today. We didn't talk about exclusively SEO, but as SEO, it really is a complementary game. Especially if you have a little budget. And we also gave you guys a couple of maybe guerrilla tactics on how you can still add on to your SEO campaigns with things like retargeting or small ad campaigns on a very economical budget, but still really extend the value that ultimately the success that you get your clients.
Amen to that. Anyways, we appreciate you guys, and happy Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my camera just shut off right at that moment. But yeah, happy Tuesday, everybody. Have a great week. Frankie, looking forward to seeing you in
it's going to be awesome.
2 days.
All right.
Peace out. Have a good day, everybody.
See you guys.